You can live a life full of love and light if you just let the Spirit guide you. It's the remedy where you'll find peace, but you must let the Spirit guide you.
Who made y'all priests?
What's up, world? This is the Honorable Minister, Awo Fafore.
What's going on, good people? This is Awo Osheun. Welcome back to the Who Made Y'all Priest podcast, where we talk about our spiritual journeys, our everyday life experiences, and the issues of the time from the perspective of two people who just happen to be priests. What's going on, Fafore?
Nothing much. I had to bring back my title just in case y'all forgot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see you hit him with the long title, man, with the full title.
Yeah, because I just want to remind people that I am an ordained minister, just in case they forgot.
Right. What if they want to get a
Yeah.
wedding performed, man? What if they want to get a wedding done?
Yeah, hit me in the DMs.
We make it happen, huh?
Yeah, we'll make it happen. Wedding, funeral, you know what I'm saying? You want me to come over for Christmas or Thanksgiving or any of the holidays to bless the food before y'all eat? Hit me up.
Right.
I give you a good rate, you know what I'm saying?
One-stop shop, man.
Yeah. Just share the podcast, and then that'll get you 20% off.
Right. What's going on, man? What's been going on with you?
Hey, I don't know when we gonna release this episode, so by the time it come out, this will probably be old news, but we're gonna talk about it anyway. So you hear about Jonathan Majors.
I don't even know who that is.
Cain the Conqueror.
I don't know who that is either.
The former heavyweight champion of the world who until Adonis Creed beat him up.
Oh. I think I know who you're talking about now, man.
The actor.
Yeah, the big black dude. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been paying attention a little bit to and this ain't funny because, let's just say, he did do what he did. But the video, the video of him running through the city is hilarious. Apparently, when he was working out for the Marvel comic thing, she was right there in the gym with him because her win was next level. But anyway, Cain or Jonathan Majors just got found guilty of assault and some other charge, So they saying he combed the hair back.
Oh wow.
So,
Yeah. I ain't know nothing about that. I ain't seen no video. I ain't heard nothing about that. But I don't watch the regular news. I don't do none of that. I listen to talk radio, and if it ain't on TikTok, I definitely didn't see it.
Yeah, the only reason I know is because I have like Yahoo Finance and then Yahoo News. Apparently, I knew I did it for Yahoo Finance back when I was trading options, but apparently it was set up for Yahoo News as well. So I'll get like pinged on the big stories or whatever. So that's how I got alerted to it. And I thought he was gonna get off. I thought that video where he was running away from her, and then the driver in the car, he said that she hit him. So I thought he was gonna get off, But a couple things that's wrong with the judicial system, and again, this has nothing to do with whether he was guilty or not. That whole innocent until proven guilty is a lie. I've been to jury duty. I was on a jury for a murder case. That ain't true. Like when you hear the conversations going on, like when they're trying to like pick people and you hear what people are saying. I mean, it was people who flat out who was like, I feel the guy is guilty. When you get into those rooms with the jury and you going over, and giving your vote as opposed to to whether you think they're guilty or not. Those conversations are crazy. And then if you actually Google the definition of the word peers, you definitely not judged by a jury of your peers.
Right.
Because if you in the jury pool, right, you should know exactly, like you should be able to paint a picture of who is on trial based upon the people you see in the jury.
Mm.
And the 2 times that I was in a jury pool, one time I actually got selected. Both times I'm looking around, I have no idea who the person is, what they look like, what their background is, judging by the people I see here in the jury pool. So if people know anything about that type of thing, you will realize like it's a messed up system all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, man, dude got found guilty. And to quote a famous philosopher by the name of Christopher Wallace, his reign at the top was short like leprechaun. Because Marvel done already cut him. His management company cut him. His publicist, his PR team cut him. And now we're gonna see if Megan Good gonna cut him. But it's sad, man, because he had a lot. I mean, he's easily lost tens of millions of dollars at a minimum.
Right.
Now, if you project that out as to what he really could have made from being in these high profile movies and what that would have looked like, with other films that haven't even been mentioned and all that, man, he lost a lot of money.
Right. Right. The thing you said about uh, being innocent until proven guilty is a lie. That's a farce.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never been on that side of the courtroom where you're being selected for jury duty and all the things that go along with that. But I do know that there are a lot of people who are unfamiliar with the system, who believe wholeheartedly in the system. And there are people out there that believe that if you come into contact with law enforcement, you had to have done something. They are
Absolutely.
they are real people out there that wholeheartedly believe that, and they believe it with good intentions. I believe that a lot of them believe that the only way you're going to come into contact with law enforcement is if you have actually done something. So
Absolutely.
if you are there and you are on trial for whatever the reason might be, you have to be guilty. And if you're not guilty of that, you're guilty of something. So we're gonna see this out, and a lot of people are gonna believe that he or she is guilty. Now the thing you said about peer, what is that definition, or a roundabout definition of peer?
Essentially, we're talking about age group, we're talking about culture, race, socioeconomic background, things of
Mm-hmm.
that nature.
All of those things.
Right. So when you go into a jury pool, you should be able to look around at the people, or if you have conversations with the people, be like, okay, yeah, we kind of in the same situation, right? You know, like if I enter into a jury pool, I'm expecting for the majority of the people to be in that room to be black and male off the top, right? That's something visually that I can see.
Right.
Like that's what I'm expecting. Then as we're talking, if I start talking to the people, then we'll realize, educational background, things of that nature, we're kind of in the same space. That's not happening. So they're not being judged by their peers. They're being judged by 12 people who just happen to live in the same county.
Right. So let me ask you this though. In your experience doing that, does the law define peer the same way that it's defined colloquially, or is the legal definition of peer something different?
You know what? That's actually a good question because you do see different legal definitions for words than maybe you may see it in the Webster Dictionary.
Right. That's what I think it is. Because when I think of peer, when I think of peer, when you use it in a legal term, I think of the word contemporary. That's the first word come to my mind is contemporary, not necessarily what you're talking about, which I agree with you though. But when I hear peer used in a legal sense, I don't think of what you and I are thinking about right now. The first word that comes to my mind is contemporary. Like
Well,
you said,
even if I
sound like
look
it's
at the
happening more
word
than family.
contemporary, and
Mm,
again, I don't have the definition in front of me, so I understand the way we use words are differently. It's different than what is actually defined as. So, just going out how we use contemporary, I see the word peer, but maybe less boundaries,
mm,
right? So maybe we're still maybe the boundary of age is lightened a little bit, but I still do see things like socioeconomic background. I still see things like cultural or racial background to a degree, and that could be maybe play with a little bit. Maybe instead of just black, now we go to black and Hispanic, right? Maybe it's broadened a little bit in the word, the way I see the word contemporary used over peer. But when you talk about peer, it's very, very narrow. And I remember looking up the word peer when I was in San Antonio living there. And I was on my first jury duty. And I go
mm.
in, they called me a part of the pool. And I'm looking around. I said, none of these people, but maybe a handful, look like me. So who the hell is on trial?
Right.
Now, I can understand they probably called a lot of people for a couple of different trials and they're just trying to piece together who's going. But I'm still not seeing enough people who look like me to represent that peer, you
Right.
know. So that's when I first looked up the definition and the etymology of the word. And I was like, yeah, this is a little crazy.
Mm.
So, but prayers out to everybody involved. As we know as priests, all things happen for a reason. There's a lesson to be learned in this. Definitely from Jonathan's standpoint, his ex-girlfriend, there's a lesson to be learned. And other people that's probably close, right? Whether it's his new girlfriend, maybe his parents, or other people that may be in close vicinity to him. But there's definitely a lesson to be learned, if nothing more, him and the ex.
Mm.
So hopefully they learn the lesson from this experience and they take the medicine to heal themselves so they can move forward. But
Sure.
it's a pricely lesson for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's
Right.
why when I go to speak, I go to my ancestors. I ask them to help me for something, and I always say, "But hey, but please don't do no reckless shit." Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need nothing out the way to have. Just give me a little nudge, here and there. But
All
yeah,
right.
nothing
Make it
wild.
real subtle. Make it real
Yeah,
subtle.
yeah, yeah. Yell real loud at a max, and I get it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But you know, make it plain in my readings, but don't. Yeah, I don't need my car to blow up or nothing crazy.
Right. Right. So what we got for the people today, man?
Oh man, we got a good show for today. Today we are going to spend some time focusing on men's health. So you ready to get on into it?
Man, let's get into it, man.
All right.
Brother Abeid, how you doing this evening, man? How you doing?
Peace. I'm good. I'm good.
Peace,
Man,
peace.
we really
Had a very
appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come kick it with us here on the Who Made Y'all Priest podcast. We really appreciate you, man. We appreciate
well. I appreciate the invite.
you.
I
Most
appreciate the
definitely.
invite, and I love the question.
Absolutely. And you know don't know this, but we've actually talked about you a while ago, like that you would be
Hmm.
somebody good that'll be on the show. And
Okay.
we just had, a couple things set up and we wanted to, things to fall a certain way, but then it was like, season 5 is a good season to kind of reach out to you. So again,
Yeah,
greatly appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
it's my pleasure, man. I'm honored to be.
I
We
sure.
appreciate it. So introduce yourself to the family. Tell us who you are. Tell us what you do. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
T. Well, my name is Dauod Abeid. I'm a Brooklyn. I'm a child of Brooklyn, so I was born here and I've lived here most of my life. I'm also a child of revolution. So, I was conceived and born into revolutionary thinking and practices.
Mm,
Um, and it's something I spent a lot of my life managing and mitigating to bring me to where I am now.
Mm,
Um, I'm currently doing healing work, community leadership work, um, a lot of focused on men mental health and men having authentic and safe and empowered community amongst each other. Um, I am attuned to master levels of Reiki and been practicing for 18 years. I'm a black belt in Filipino martial arts. Many things, many hats and many things.
right. Yeah. You got a long resume, man.
right. right.
Long resume. Yeah. So as is customary here on the Who Made Y'all Priest podcast, we talk about our spiritual journeys
Mhm.
and things of that nature, mostly. So tell us about your spiritual journey, your trajectory, and how you got
Indeed.
to where you are now.
Yeah. So the reason I always say I'm a child of revolution is because I came into life with that intention, with that calling, and then, that didn't happen. You know what I mean? I'm born in the 70s. People kind of were
Mm,
doing certain things, but it didn't go that way. So I
mm,
dealt with a lot of frustration and anger early on in my life with awareness of all the injustices and imbalances and not really having drunk the Kool-Aid ever. So being a
Mm-hmm.
kid who never accepted the narratives, never accepted the belief systems, never accepted the things, and always feeling like an outsider and wanting to change that. So, being a person who was always intuitive as well, some people call it claircognizant, but I just always knew certain truths and knew certain things at a young age and could read people and kind of see to the core of things. And that developed as I got older. Um, Fast forward through my martial arts practice, in having teachers who were responsible and balanced, they always taught that you have to be able to save a life as well as take a life, right? There should be
Mm,
balance. So my teachers really emphasized being aware of different knowing modalities of healing and ultimately like really wanted all of us as we got our mastery in martial arts to each find some healing modality that we were well versed in as well. Being a Star Wars fan and loving the supernatural
yeah.
and things of that nature. When I started learning about Reiki, my mother got attuned for Reiki in the 90s. When I learned about that and the idea that people could harness healing energy and use it to help facilitate the healing of others, that just intrigued me. And I went on a quest for many years to find a qualified teacher that I felt was authentic. And that's where my spiritual journey really began. You know what I
mm,
mean? Once I got attuned for Reiki, a lot of things shifted. My awarenesses shifted, my sensitivities shifted, and phenomenon that I was aware of at a young age that I might have questioned, I embraced them. Um, Many of my family, from the Puerto Rican side as well as the Caribbean side, they practice Santeria and Yoruba and Ifa traditions. So I grew up around those traditions, and there was something that was always in my life, and I was interested about, um, yet had reservations. So meaning that I would go and I wanted to learn the technology and I wanted to learn all these things. I knew the value of it, but there was always like a something pushing me right away, which very frustrated me a lot of my life. Until I got into more aligning with different American and South American indigenous practices. And then some priests that I know read some stuff out and questioned, and they basically were like, "Oh, the reason that you feel pushed back with this particular thing is because most of the people around you are indigenous to the Americas, and that's what they know. And they don't know that, so they're kind of like, it's causing a uh how can I say? They
Blockage.
want me to lean. It's causing a block. They want you to go into these
Mm-hmm.
things.
mm,
Um, so like having tangible experiences like that opened my mind to many things, and there's a lot of different instances that I could bring up. But ultimately, the Reiki journey opened my eyes in a new way to the spiritual world and allowed me access to things that became realized, and there was no more doubt or question around them anymore. which made me realize that I then had to go deeper into my study, you
Mm.
know, and have an understanding of those things that like I say, they always talk about they took our language away from us and they took our
Yes.
history, but they took our magic away from us. That's really what
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying. That's really
Right,
the
right.
things. In understanding
Absolutely.
that, then I was like, well, that's what I need to learn about. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing that they don't want us to know.
Right.
You know. So I don't know if that answered the question, but
Most
Absolutely.
definitely.
Beautifully.
Most
Answer the
definitely.
okay,
question
awesome.
beautifully. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. Now you mentioned Reiki. So that was
Hmm.
the thing that kind of really drew me to your page. I was looking at it,
Hmm.
this is a while ago now. And I saw that you were a Reiki master. And
Hmm.
you are probably the first man that I've met who is a Reiki master.
Hmm.
Because things like that, obviously, women, for
Yeah.
whatever reason, happen to lean towards and men kind of shy away from.
Hmm.
So, and then I saw that you were a level 4, and I said,
Hmm.
wow, I've never even heard of that
Yeah,
before.
there's more.
Right, right. Because when I reached out to you and I was asking you about that, and you were telling me that
Hmm.
there were more. And I'm interested in Reiki. And one day, whenever Spirit says, "Okay, you've done the other things you needed to do," I'll go into Reiki and I'll get certified to be a Reiki master as well.
Hmm.
But can you explain to the people what Reiki is to you
Indeed.
and how can we use Reiki to benefit ourselves?
Indeed. Well, the thing is, Reiki is a discipline that's focused upon gaining command or access to an innate ability that all humans have, all beings have. So if you think about it, even as a child, when you hurt yourself, you put your hands and rub the thing. Or when your belly hurt or your head
Mhm.
hurt, when your mother put her hand on your belly or do whatever, it soothed you. There's something we understood that there's touch and healing. You know what I mean? So that's
Right.
one of those things in regards to our awareness and magic that we lost. You know what I mean? And that's part of the way my teacher taught me that it's something that everyone in some way can do, similar to like we can all sing, but you don't want to hear everybody sing, but everybody can sing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Reiki is similar in such that it is something that everyone does have access to in some degree can utilize um, with the discipline of what Reiki is, it enables a person to have a stronger command of it. You know what I mean? And develop the ability to add more intention to something that we already can do. The name Reiki is Japanese, translates basically to like most high energy or divine energy. So the Rei being the divine and the Ki being the energy, similar to like Chi or Prana. You know what I mean? Where we hear in other things. Reiki is something the disciplines my teacher taught. My teacher's from India, and she was like, "We've always been doing this." Some people say it goes back to Atlantis. Definitely something that was in Egypt. I meet people from indigenous practices who tell me there's traditions that are similar in all their different cultures, whether it be
Absolutely.
Polynesia, all over Southeast Asia, and the African continent, and the Americas. How many people had grandmas or somebody who laid hands? You know what I mean? We know of these things, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
but the Reiki tradition is the first most recent modern iteration of it where um the non-initiated, I will say, or outside of certain families, people gained access to learn how to use this. So before that, you were either like a yogi or some kind of priest in the Eastern tradition or something, or in the other indigenous cultures around the world. Usually it ran in your family and it was passed on to somebody. Dr. Asui, the founder of Reiki, he was a monk in Japan, and he basically was going on a study to answer why they said the Buddha and people like Jesus and other people could heal with their hands. And he was led to study some scrolls in Sanskrit, which is an ancient language from India and Tibet. And those scrolls showed him how to a practice for him to activate the Reiki within himself and use it. And then he went on to create like a
Hmm.
center, like they had a school, and there was a whole thing in Japan that kind of got upset by World War II. Yet it did spread out into the West and other places, and that's why most people speak of Reiki because that is it's kind of like how can I explain it? Reiki is like karate to energy healing, meaning that most people call all martial arts karate. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because
Right. Right.
that's the intersection. That's where people learned about it, right? So
Yeah.
Reiki is similar in that way. Yet it's not limited to that one discipline. That's just the one that most people have access to. And where there's been like a the reality is with Reiki, it's good and bad. People have access to it, but at the same time, you can get a paper that says you're a Reiki master in a weekend if you pay the right amount of money for that course. Um, or there's people who've been doing it a year who tell me they're a master. So,
Mm-hmm.
when the Western world gets holds of things, we tend to monetize it and kind of remove the spiritual responsibility from it and base it strictly on memory, you know what I'm saying, and
Right.
knowledge. Um, and that's the only downfall I will say with Reiki, because that aspect does exist. It's something that I always tell everybody to really vet whatever practitioner they're going to go to, find out their story, see who they've worked with, understand what they learned. Like, ask them as many questions as you can to make sure that this is a person that they say like any doctor should also have been able to heal themselves, right? You don't
Mhm.
want a sick
Absolutely.
doctor. You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying?
Right.
So similar with
Yeah.
Reiki, a Reiki practitioner, their energy should be in a good place if you're going to work with them that way, because they don't teach it generally in the West, but there is an exchange and there is a
Right.
spiritual component to it, that many of us understand who have practices in other traditions. The Western world doesn't acknowledge these things, so when they generally teach Reiki, they don't talk about the fact that you can take on things, and know how to clean yourself and know how to protect yourself from stuff. You know what I mean? So
Right.
um, that aspect is very important as well. But ultimately, it's a channeling of the life force energy that permeates every living thing, um, and it's learning how to focus and be a conduit for that to help support the healing energy that everybody holds anyway. You're kind of magnifying it. So I tend
Mhm.
to liken it to, we can all go out in the sun and feel the sun's heat, and then if you put a magnify glass in the sun, you can turn it into a laser. You know what I mean?
Right.
So a Reiki practitioner who has a command of it, that's basically what you're doing. It's not that it's my energy, it's just that I know how to channel the energy that's there and focus it. You know what I mean? So it can be
Right.
better supportive to what's already happening. That energy is always already healing us and supporting us in a way, but it's just kind of like it's a way to focus it and
Mhm.
amplify it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, the nerd in me is already loving this conversation, right?
Right.
It's like there's so many different directions that we can go,
Yeah.
to get away from the topic at hand. But I'm gonna get away from the topic at hand for a little bit and kind of go where
Hmm.
you were going. The beauty about what you were saying that I hope people don't miss. It's first of all, you talking about being interested in, like the Yoruba Santeria tradition, but was being blocked and forced or directed in another direction, and that you
Hmm.
actually obeyed those directives, and look
Mhm.
at you now. So that's
Hmm.
important for people to understand. When there's blockages somewhere, a lot of times that is for your own good. When
Indeed.
you trying to go straight and for some reason you can't, it's because you're supposed to go in another direction,
Right.
and honoring that is going to only bring you blessings. So that's
Indeed.
that's absolutely beautiful. But in listening to you talk, I realized that if you become pigeonholed into just your tradition that you grew up in,
Hmm.
or maybe you didn't grow up in a tradition and then you just picked one and you decided I'm gonna be tunnel vision and be stuck in that. You lose out on a lot of beauty, because there is not a tradition that I have come across that I have studied that didn't have gaps in the practice
Mhm.
Hmm.
because of colonization and war and modernization and things of that nature. We have gotten away from a lot of the teachings, so it's fragmented, right? So you
Hmm.
you have to be a complete practitioner of spirituality. Let's get rid of the titles of whatever particular thing that you practice. If you move past that, or if you really focus on what you practice, you'll realize there's some gaps, right? There's some
Hmm.
things in Ifa that may exist that is not taught or has been lost, right?
Hmm.
So you got to go somewhere else in order to get that information. The thing that you were saying about, being able to take a life and save a life, in martial arts. I love the fact that you have traditions, that have a focus on moving the body, whether
Hmm.
it's martial arts, whether it's yoga, these things exist. We don't have that as practiced
Indeed.
in Ifa. You know, I like that we have traditions who, as part of their practice, call attention to the diet. In
Hmm.
African spirituality, we don't have that.
Yeah.
It's in the old. When you talk about the wisdom of nature, the wisdom of nature definitely speaks to a way in which we do everything, the way we eat,
Hmm.
the way we interact relationally, whether it's intimate or platonic, so forth and so on, right? It's there. You just have to have a little bit of common sense or kind of step outside of that teaching, they'll get it somewhere else.
Hmm.
So the things that you bring up is highlighting gaps in my own practice, which is why I am a fan of spirituality, period.
Hmm.
Oshayun and myself, we've talked about it before where we said that we don't want to be priests of Ifa. We want to be priests whose foundation happens to be Ifa.
Indeed.
It's
Right.
a difference.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, what you said was beautiful.
I mean, and that's the beauty of it. We're diasporic people. So even with me and my relationship to Ifa, it's because I have mixed heritage. So
Mm-hmm.
whereas my sisters and my father lean towards that side, the ancestors who are around me are Native American. Though that's who's here. So I've always been drawn to that. I always dreamed that way. You know what I mean? It's the thing that drew me, and then like my mother and my uncle, and that's the direction that they go. You know what I mean? Um,
Absolutely.
and what I realized in that was that, coming from a pro-black foundation, it was hard for me to honor that because I felt like I was shirking my history and my heritage. So
Right.
I kept going back. Well, why can't I get initiated in EFA? But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like, well, maybe let's ask them again. You know what I'm saying? Like these are the
Right.
things that
Right.
because I'm like, but I respect this. You know what I mean? It was a thing. And yeah, I was pointed in another direction because that's who's closest to me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right.
And so for me, once I honored that, like, oh, so many things started opening up, and I had so many experiences. Once I honored it, and I think that is something important for us of the diaspora in that way, because the reality is we have mixed heritage. Just like I'm learning, I have a lot of Scottish heritage. And as a kid, I was infatuated with Thor and the Norse gods and all that stuff. And the
Mm-hmm.
Scots are Viking, it's connected. So I'm like, okay, so that's a little bit of my ancestors talking to me too. It's not, I can't ignore that because there's something there. You know what I mean? And then when you get
Absolutely.
to the foundation of it, it's all similar anyway. Thor, Shango, like, you know what I mean? They got similar
Absolutely.
stuff going on,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I laugh when you say that because I travel a lot,
Mhm,
and when COVID came, especially internationally, I love international travel. COVID came, shut that down, so I had to kind of redirect. So I started going to like places off the beaten path, beautiful natural places in the United States, but
mhm,
places that don't show up on the travel guide. Like I'm in Santa Fe and
mm,
Albuquerque, New Mexico, Oklahoma City. I went to um, Sedona,
mm,
Salt Lake City, all those different type of places, right? Absolutely beautiful. And I'm out here doing things, and I'm like, I'm doing this to appease my white ancestors, and I joke a lot, right? So sometimes people don't know take me seriously, but I was like dead serious. I have, a white ancestor, a woman,
mhm,
who walks with me, like
mhm,
she's probably in here right now hanging out, like yeah, exactly. And I'm Scottish, so when I went to Peru and I was on a train coming back from Machu Picchu, I sat across from some people from Scotland. And I was
mm,
like, oh, we cousins. And they started laughing.
mhm.
And then I told them my last name and they were like,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
might have a point. So we might be cousins. So I plan
Funny.
on one day going to Scotland because
Yeah.
A, I like to travel, and B, I need to get some of that dirt from over there to put on my
Hmm.
ancestor altar because I have
Exactly.
Scottish ancestors. So you gotta honor them all. You
Right.
Yeah.
know.
Right.
And it's important.
Something else that I don't want the people to miss is that you said that once you get down to the foundation of these spiritual practices, that they are pretty much the same. Fafore
Mm-hmm.
and myself, we talk about that all the time, that these are different spiritual systems telling the same stories through different cultural lenses. So we've
Hmm.
Absolutely.
come to understand that the foundation is pretty much the same. I was very unfamiliar with your page, and my brother Fafore told me about you, and I started to look at your page, and much of what we see on your page has to do with men's mental health.
Hmm.
Um, what was it that gave you such a love for that topic?
So, like mentioned earlier, that it's a lot of women practicing Reiki. It's a lot of women doing yoga. It's a lot of women going to spas. Um, 90% of the people I work with are women as well. You know what I mean? Client wise.
Mm,
When I'm in medicine, when I used to do a lot of plant medicine and those things, and when I was in those South American and North American traditions, what people consider shamanic, even though shamanism is from Russia, you know what I mean? But people call them
mm,
shamanic, you know what I mean? Um,
right.
Most it's a lot of women, right? So that was always something concerning for me. And then some sisters of my brothers and I, they all work in healing, and they were like, we keep trying to do things for men, we keep trying to, and they're not showing up. Y'all need to do something. So we took it on, and we're just like, we need to create something for our brother because
Mm,
men, if the women are getting right and the men aren't getting right, half of civilization isn't healthy. You know what I'm
right.
saying? That's just
Mm,
the bottom line.
mm.
So, and men can be more problematic. An unhealthy man can be a lot more problematic than an unhealthy woman in a lot of ways, I feel. Right. So we just
Absolutely.
kind of like, we need to take this on. You know what I mean? And yeah, we created Men at Work Healing to create a space to for our brothers to come and start the healing journey. You know what I mean? It's not the end all be all, it's an entry point, and people can take things to different levels, but ultimately it's an entry point that I believe isn't as intimidating if someone was to go say, I'm coming, it's not as intimidating as going to therapy, which
Mm,
is hard for a lot of people, or not as intimidating for
Right.
to go to get a spiritual reading or something like that. But some of my brothers are priests and Ifa, you know what I mean? And some of us, so we have the different traditions present in our leadership. Um, so that if someone does have an affinity and is willing and ready to go walk down a certain path, there's people there that we trust that we can point them to. You know what I mean?
Mm.
One of our brothers, clinical licensed social worker. We have people that work with us. But ultimately, to answer the question, it was because it was a need, and the myself and my brothers felt we were qualified to do so. Um, just because, again, a lot of men in the healing sector, and this isn't a slight, but they don't appeal to certain men, if
mm,
that makes sense.
No,
mm,
that
You know what
makes
I mean?
perfect sense.
So we felt like we're men who appeal to certain men that generally won't appeal, don't appeal to the traditional people who are healers don't appeal to them, but
right.
they find camaraderie and brotherhood and likeness with us. So we realize that we're kind of anointed to be the ones to do this. You know what I
Mm,
mean? If that makes
right.
sense.
Right.
Right.
So yeah, man, that's why we're doing this. And that's
Mm,
Right.
that's why I focus on it.
And that's
right.
beautiful because that makes
Mhm,
sense, right?
right.
Because certain type of men only can follow, deal with, respect, um, really like allow those certain type of men to pour into, can open
Mhm.
up to certain types of men.
Yeah.
And if they don't kind of see a version of themselves in you, if you don't fit that a certain level of masculinity,
Hmm.
there's just men who are going to be like, nah, I'll pass.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that representation does matter in these spaces.
Hmm.
It's important, and for me, I did a lot of work working with young people in different organizations here in the city. And I worked in like, youth prisons and suspension schools and did like young men's rites of passage groups and things of that nature and had a lot of success where other people didn't and they didn't understand why. But it's like because I was running the streets when I was young. So
Mm,
I
Right.
bring that to the table when I'm working with them. It's not,
right.
I'm not intimidated by them. They see themselves and they see I represent a possibility of who they can be. So therefore they listen
Right.
to me because they know what their reality is at the moment. And they can't get away with it. You don't understand, or it ain't you ain't real, or all that stuff that we do, we discount each other. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, the fact that all of my, three of us out of the five of men at work are all black belts. You know what I mean? Four of us are martial artists to some high level of training. So those things all grew up in New York City in the most part, in the crazy times in New York City. You know what I mean? So
Right. Right.
it's it does qualify us to be a space where certain brothers show up and they're able to have a mutual respect and not discount and be like, ah, that's some whatever, you know what I mean? Y'all don't get it. That stuff that we tend to do,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely.
Right. Usually when we're talking about mental health or health in general,
Hmm.
sometimes we forget that we are speaking about a sickness. We're speaking about a sickness, and in this particular case, where we're talking about mental health, I think one word can be used to describe the sickness or the type of sickness that we're talking about. And we're talking about trauma. Some type of trauma has taken place for there to be a mental sickness or a mental imbalance.
Hmm.
What do you think is the main source of trauma in men today?
Society, and I'll say that because I feel that the things we're taught to be as men, especially people who quote unquote like black men or brown men or Latino, or poor men, right? The things we're looked at as are the pinnacle of what masculinity is. Most of us aren't free to be that. We don't have the resources to be that. You know what I'm saying? So there's a sense of inadequacy, I think, that permeates the consciousness of most men in this society that they're constantly trying to overcompensate and prove that they are men, but they're unsure themselves based on the criteria of what we're shown. You know what I mean? And I think that, like, for me, from my years, like I said, of doing young men's groups and working with youth in prison and things of that nature, most of the problems, whether it be violent, whether it be selling drugs, it's for them to try to assert their manhood. They're trying to prove they're men.
Mm,
To defend it or prove it. You know what I mean? So
Right. Right.
I feel like the unnatural space of this society, that's an affliction, period, if you're a male. And I'm sure, and for women as well, but I'm just saying, like, I can speak from my male perspective. I think it's an affliction, period. And then if we go into the histories of all the things that happened during slavery and colonization and all that stuff, it's like, the protectors weren't allowed to protect or
right.
weren't able to
Right.
protect. So just our existence in a way, if we're not smart, our existence is a constant reminder of defeat in a certain kind of way. And I just feel
Mm,
like that's what a lot of men are struggling with. Like that's the bottom line to it,
right.
you know?
Wow.
Mm,
Wow. So, you know, you get on Instagram, you get on, well, I'm gonna say mostly Instagram is where I see it.
Yeah, these days.
And there's like sister circles, there's goddess retreats,
Hmm.
there's all these different things that cater specifically to women's healing. Like there are times I look at something, I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
so I guess something I'd be interested in, and it'll say women only.
Hmm.
Um, like there seems to be a void of spaces for men for their healing,
Hmm.
for our mental health, for us just to have conversations amongst men about things that we may be going through, to talk to other men and see maybe how, they've dealt with certain issues, how where have they gone for healing, things of that nature. Like, am I missing something, or is there really like that big of a void for healing spaces for men?
There's that big of a void. Um, and again, it's because as men who are always in as men in societies where we're always trying to um, validate or prove our manhood, that also tells us that we're supposed to be able to endure and push through and handle things. Then to say I want healing is saying you're not as manly,
Right.
right? Based on
Right.
those principles of those Western principles that have been placed upon us. So it's kind of like it short circuits itself. For most people, to get healing means I'm admitting that I'm not strong.
Right.
If I need healing, it means that I can't take it, that I can't endure something, that something really bothered me. You know what I'm saying? And um, that's a scary place for a lot of men because weakness means vulnerability, and vulnerability means you're not safe.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean that's the reality of the word vulnerable. It means that you're not safe. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Right.
you know, so for many of us to seek healing, it's a scary space because it goes to a subconscious belief. I believe in inadequacy in some way and things of that nature.
Right.
So a lot of brothers avoid it. They're like, "No, I'm good." They'll be in pain and they won't admit they're in pain, whether it be physical or mental or emotional, because they don't want to present weakness. You know, and it's sad because our sisters are upheld by their emotional intelligence. That's something that is validated for women to be emotionally intelligent. So for them to explore their emotions and get healing and deal with their traumas, they see that as enhancing self, it's freeing self, it's liberating self, because those are feminine principles in a certain way, you know what I mean? Yet
Absolutely.
we are all balanced beings, ideally, right? So for men to be fully functional, we have to also understand how to balance the feminine principles within ourselves, or else we're just one-sided. But
Absolutely.
we're taught to look so down upon and demean the feminine principle that we are unable to heal, because then we have to step into that realm, and then nobody wants to be that. You know what I
Right.
mean? So that's the problem to me and why they don't exist. Unless they're like super macho and it's focused on like being quote unquote alpha men, and it's a bunch of dudes with no shirts on doing push-ups and screaming and stuff. Like there's
Right.
those things. You know what I mean? Those things are out
Right.
there.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
which I'm not gonna knock because I'm the dude who might be doing some push-ups with my shirt. You know what I mean? Like I don't I'm not looking down upon that, but every brother's not that. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
Right.
mean? And that's not all that we are either.
Right.
When I believed I was just that, I used to have a lot of problems in relationships because I didn't know how to align with the feminine or the softer side of myself. Everything was always the other side, and then
Right.
I'm wondering why we're not understanding each other. You know what I mean? So it's
Absolutely. 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 You know, I love the transition, and it's like you are kind of reading our minds because you will talk
mm,
about something that'll lead us into, the next question. And you talk
let's
about
do
the
that.
masculine and feminine,
Hmm.
and I tell people all the time, everything is about the balance of the masculine and the feminine. You
Right.
Hmm.
know, when I will show you and myself, we do readings for clients, we tell them like the way we interact, the way we communicate with spirit is through signs and symbols that reflect the masculine and the feminine. Like that's a
Hmm.
real thing, and people don't
Indeed.
understand that balance. So with that in mind, one of the things that I've always kind of struggled with, seeing all of these different spaces for women, right? And I do believe women should have a space for women. I
Hmm.
believe men should have a space for men. I'm not trying to take that away from women at all. But there's balance.
Hmm.
And you can't out heal the trauma and the pain of the other side. So as women enter into these spaces where they're going to get healing, when you step out of those places, especially if you're, in a heterosexual relationship and you deal with a man who is unhealed,
Hmm.
at some point you are going to be pulled back into a space of unhealing.
Indeed.
You know, so I've always thought about the utility of these spaces that are so heavy, oriented to the women, especially in spiritual spaces, right? So
Mm.
there are people who don't really have a spiritual background, but they understand there's a need for healing. I get that, if that's what they want to do, fine. But when you are in these spiritual spaces and you practice any form of spirituality, to me, it's like if we are really practitioners of spirituality, where's the push to, okay, let's invite the men in then? If there's no places for the men to exist, and we're doing all these things, healing the women, and we're only in our spaces, you would think, thinking about the balance, there would be some places to invite the men in, but there's not. Uh, what do you think about that as far as all these women getting healing, no spaces for men, and how useful that is, or you know, is it just like
Well,
a ticking time bomb waiting to
it
explode at some
is. I
point?
mean, it is to a degree because it's like a lot of what the women are healing from is stuff they've experienced with men. You know what I mean? That aren't
Right,
healed.
right,
So if they're going to get in their healing and they're in a relationship, sometimes the light bulbs are going to go off and they be like, this dude's not healthy. You know what I'm saying? And they're going to come back with language and awareness that's going to make it difficult for them to stay where they once were because they'll be able to
right,
identify how unhealthy it is. You know what I mean? So
right.
again, it's why it's necessary for men who have a certain awareness um in practice to step up and start holding space for other men, you know what I mean? Because we can only do that for each other, and I think because of the way my observation is, because of the history of how things have gone, most men, most heterosexual men only really explore quote unquote being open, or I would say vulnerable, but that's a buzzword for me. Vulnerable is a funny word for me, but being
Right.
open or sharing certain things with women in their lives, but they only can go really to a point because women don't really understand. And we are also afraid to look too weak to the women in our lives. So we never really go where if we have a safe space amongst other men who have shared their pains and their whatever their senses of inadequacies or fears and all those things, then it
Mm-hmm.
becomes normal. Like, oh, you've been through that too.
Right.
Oh, you went through that too, and now we can start talking. Now you could cry if you want to cry. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right,
because that's
right.
what happens in our spaces. Brothers have cried who said they haven't cried since they were a little kid. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And they'll start talking, and other brothers are like, "Yo, man, go ahead." And they cry, they talk, and they get it out, and they might get a hug, and nobody makes a big deal out of it. It's like, yo, you've been holding that for 20 years. You got to let that go. You know what I'm
Right.
Right,
saying?
right.
But that can only happen amongst men. So the sisters are doing what they do because that's what women have done. And also in the diaspora, I think the women have been empowered to a certain degree and allowed to do things to a certain degree that we haven't. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's something that we have to kind of like get over because our gathering is seen as scary in the past. You know what I mean? Or as a threat.
Right.
So, we also have to we have to relearn how to commune together in a safe way as men, where we're not competing with each other and we're not there to like outdo each other and see each other as a threat or competition and all those things,
Hmm.
and it's going to take some work to get back into that space where we can be brothers together.
Right.
So I think that's
Absolutely.
what a lot of that is. It's just that it's going to take a lot of decolonizing. We got to learn to
Absolutely.
think different.
Mm.
Absolutely. And it's
Like I was gonna
funny.
say, just to even touching on it, like, I traveled sometimes. So like, I was in Ethiopia for a month, right? And the funny thing there was that what I noticed, and even I've spent a lot of times in Jamaica, and as homophobic, there's a brand of homophobia in Jamaica that's unique to Jamaica, right? But I understand why. Yet still, the men are more affectionate with each other. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying?
Mm-hmm.
The most gangster dudes I knew in Kingston will be walking down the street singing a song on the top of their lungs, you know what I'm saying? Smiling and doing whatever. Like there's a different level of affection and freedom and stuff that existed where like here specifically in this country there's a lot that's been taken from us. So like I'll say it
Right.
was in Ethiopia, like men hold hands,
Yeah.
older boys are very affectionate to younger boys. They're like walk down the street and they'll be rubbing their head and hugging them. And like I was on the train, it was super crowded, and this brother just came and sat on my lap and like went like this, put his hand on my shoulder, and he was just like, there was no seats. It was crowded. He saw me as his family, and he was just like, yo, I need to sit, brother. And I was like, cool, I'm sitting. It don't mean it's not sexualized. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And I
Right.
think that's a big problem. A lot of the stuff, again, like I said in the beginning, I think we're struggling so much to
Hmm.
to be validated as men that it blocks our ability to go into those spaces that are energetically feminine.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I can relate
You
to that.
understand what I'm saying?
I can really. I remember one time. This was a long time ago, and I was in North Carolina with a woman I was dating at the time, and her cousin was a guy, and he came up to me like, we got food back there or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. He's like, you want me to make you a plate?
Mhm,
And I was like, what?
mhm.
Like, no, I don't want no. I didn't say this, but I think
Yeah,
I was like, no, thank. I'm thinking
yeah.
to myself, I don't want no grown man making me no plate. Like,
Hmm,
that's weird,
hmm.
but it shouldn't be. You know,
Right.
Right.
like today, if that was the case, I'd be like, hey, yeah, give me some this, that, and the
Yeah,
other. But at the time, I was like, hey, this is funny. Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I
yeah.
can
We
relate to that.
crazy. I
Yeah,
remember
we
being
are.
up. I remember being upset. I was dating this sister, and she said she was like, "Oh, you're so sweet," and I remember getting upset. You know what I mean? When I was younger, she told me that I was
Hmm.
sweet. Like I took that as an offense. So I was like, "Who you
Right.
calling sweet?" Like, and it's
Right.
just like that's craziness. Like that's actually, if you think about it, that's an insanity in a way.
Mm-hmm.
um, but
Right.
we that's what we've been afflicted with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
Yeah.
it's a thing.
Yeah. Like you say, it's an overcompensation for the symptom of what we call society. Men are a lot less likely to speak about emotions and things that may be draining them emotionally. And in my opinion, I agree with you that it's a symptom of the society that we live in. I did some time in prison, so I
Mm,
know the overcompensation that takes place. Like I've seen guys refuse housing because someone was already in the cell that they perceived to be a homosexual, like
mm-hmm,
refusing housing, like not even wanting to be in the same place or the same
mm-hmm,
space as somebody that you deemed as weak or feminine is crazy. It's crazy. Like
mm-hmm.
you said, it's craziness. So what are a few things that we can do to help men to be more forthcoming with things like that when they are in pain, when they are suffering mentally, physically, emotionally, however they're suffering? What can we do to help them be more forthcoming?
I mean, I think those who are courageous enough to do so have to show up authentically in society. You know what I mean? Um, so it's like, not on the street. So I used to have a whole bunch of younger brothers that I used to mentor, like on my old block. You know what I mean? I helped kind of raise them in a way and took them under my wing. And point being, like, they see, there's things that happen and I be talking to them, I'm upset, and they'll like see me cry or something. And I'm like, I'm not hiding it. I'm like, yo, I'm messed up right now. Like I'm upset about this thing. I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking of that as an example. That, we have to present ourselves authentically. You know what I mean? This is funny, but sometimes I go on these binges and I'll like take different rap groups and just listen to all their music. You know what I'm saying? I'm just going to listen to Wu-Tang right now, or I'm just going to listen to this and kind of study it and re-engage it. So I was doing that with Wu-Tang specifically, and I noticed that like Ghostface has a whole lot of songs about his heart being broken and his woman cheating on him and him expressing like,
Mm.
is he more endowed than me, or he got more money than me? Like, is he better in bed and all this stuff? And as at this age, I'm listening to it. I'm like, wow, that's actually real brave.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That he made these songs like that, and there's not a lot of examples that we get. And I'm using Ghostface because an R&B singer will do that, right? But those
Drake will
dudes
do
are
that.
Right. Well, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's a different archetype. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Exactly.
Ghostface is a goon, like Ghostface. So for him
Right.
to do that, that to me is actually like the type of stuff we need. Like we need more men who are seen a certain way to be courageous enough to do things that show the range of who they are. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? That they
Absolutely.
don't always got it together, that they're scared sometimes, that they feel inadequate or have felt intimidated, or guys being honest about being nervous the first time they lost their virginity, or you know what I'm saying, just all these things that like that a lot of brothers won't admit or won't talk about. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? You know, that to me I think is what will change it, which is a lot of what we do in our group and in our work. You know what I mean? Like we hold circles, but we tell our stories as well. Like usually if I'm facilitating, if I want brothers to go into a certain space, I'm going to tell a story or something about myself that is sensitive. You know what I mean? Or that shows where I wasn't in my best presenting space. You know what I mean? There's something that some person could be embarrassed about or feel a certain way about. And I know that the only way to get other people to do that is if I do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? So that's a big part of, I think, what's necessary, because as much as I love my father and my grandfather and my uncles and all of them, there were certain things that I remember trying to talk to them about, and they would start making jokes and like being like, you know, take it a whole nother place.
Right.
You know, it
Yeah.
reminded me of a conversation I had with a brother who came, and he said, he was like, yo, you know, in this circle, I feel like I can finally in my life finish the conversations that always get cut off in the barbershop because somebody makes a joke.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
again, that's that overcompensation, right? Right. I'm one of those people that don't believe that mental health can take place in a vacuum. Like the other dimensions of the self have to also be in alignment. The physical self, the emotional self, the spiritual self, all those things have to be in alignment. Also, you just can't be mentally healed when all of the other aspects of the self are out of
Hmm.
alignment. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, it's holistic.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And thing to me is like the Western world compartmentalizes. You know what I'm saying? The indigenous in the Western world, meaning has strayed away from the indigenous teachings of the world. So, like you were saying,
Hmm.
that there's a similarity in most cultures because everybody got sky, sun, moon, earth, air, water. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
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 everybody got that. So their principles are all based upon what they observed in those things, and it's there's a through line. But in the Western culture, those things are resources to be used. You know what I'm saying? So um we don't approach things holistically, meaning like we don't think about ourself or our life even as an ecosystem, like
Mm-hmm.
cause and effect, and how what you eat is going to affect your body. And then if your body's not healthy, then your mind, you know, we don't think
Right.
that way. You know, we think in the we're taught to believe in even a contrasting way of thinking of like even male and female are talked about as being opposites instead of complementary.
Mm-hmm.
Completely different relationship. If you call them complementary energies, call them
Right.
opposite, that means that they're opposing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So then so I think like that's a big part of what the problem is that like we're fragmented, and we're socialized to be fragmented, and we're socialized not to we've really forgotten how what we eat and what we do and how we be, how that's going to impact our experience, but then the experience of the larger community in the whole.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We're so individualized, you know, especially as men, that I
Right.
think that it's gonna have to take a letting go of that way of thinking, you know, for people to get more aligned. And that starts with ourselves. So it starts with us being honest about how the food we eat is affecting us, or educating ourselves, and
Mm.
how our spiritual practices and our beliefs, and really becoming mindful and examining all those things. Um, Admitting what's not working. You know what I mean? I think we don't we don't admit what's not working. We normalize it.
Right.
Right.
Right. You
Right.
know, you
You know?
know, another thing I remember coming up when I was younger, one of the mantras that was heavily spoken where I grew up at was "I'm not friendly." That
Mm,
was that was that was something that us as boys and the men said in my neighborhood. I'm
yeah.
not friendly, and that was worn as a badge of honor. And now I find myself finding joy in being able to just talk to, especially another black man, because those are the people that, you would walk past and not say anything to if you
Yeah,
didn't know them.
or give them a dirty look even.
Right, right, right. And so now I find joy in being able to walk up to another random brother and just strike up a conversation, and for other people to ask, "Man, did you know him?" Nah, man, I didn't
Hmm.
know. I didn't know him, man. I felt him. I felt him as my family, as my brother. So
Yeah,
yeah, when you talk
Yeah.
about the overcompensation, the violence, the anger, all of those different things, and overcompensating for the inadequacies. Man, I know exactly what you're talking about. I feel exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, yes,
Mm, mm.
real.
So you already know where I'm going with it, O'Shea, out of what he just said. So you spoke about holistic, right?
Hmm.
And then after that, you mentioned diet and about what you eat.
Hmm.
What's your diet first and foremost? And do you think that plays a role in your mental space?
Yes. So it's been a journey. It started. So now I'm now I'm considered. I define it as plant-based. So I'm not a vegan because vegan's an ideology. It's an ism. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Um, and you could be a vegan and just eat French fries all the time. You know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
I have a plant-based diet. It's highly influenced by Dr. Sebi's teachings. So it's like alkaline, plant-based, in the most part, organic. Um, it was a journey to get here. Started in the 90s. Um, a brother of mine, Sharif, came up doing martial arts in Chinatown in New York and learned a lot about herbalism and stuff as a young man. I had a girlfriend who was always have issues and plagued by her menstrual cycle, terrible cramps, headaches, like it was hard for her. And then he did like he did some work with her, prescribed her some herbs, but one of the main things he told her is to stop eating red meat. Um, and it changed for her, like it reversed.
Hmm.
The removal of the red meat and the dairy products actually it reversed. And so me being the person I am, I was like, well, if it's doing that to her, what's it doing to me? So I stopped
Right.
eating it. You know what I mean? And I saw changes in my health and in my body. So then that started a journey from 94 of me just experimenting with removing things. You know what I mean? And I did that. And then after getting attuned for Reiki, spiritually, it's like I started to not be able to do things. So I remember one day I just ate fish and it just tasted dead to me. And I
Mm.
thought it was rotten. And I was giving it to other people, like, oh, this fish is bad. And everybody's like, no, there's nothing wrong with it. And then they gave me another one and it tasted rotten. And basically, like something energetically shifted in me where I could no longer um consume flesh. It
Mhm.
wasn't a choice. It was how my energetically my sensitivity was reacting to it differently. And I
Hmm.
became primarily plant-based. I know it has a lot to do with the work that I do. Like I'm sensitive to energies now. So if I eat certain things, even if I eat food cooked by certain people and stuff, like I won't feel good. You know what I mean?
Right.
So for me, it's, a lot of people will commend and be like, I don't have that kind of discipline to whatever. And I'm like, my discipline is me honoring how I'm feeling. It's not that that's by choice. I would love to be eat pizza and I miss eating hamburgers and like I'm
Yeah.
not gonna sit here and say that I didn't enjoy those things. I'm not disgusted by them, but my energetically and even spiritually, there's a rejection of those things for me at this point. But it had to do with at first me observing and being humble enough to acknowledge that I don't know everything, and experimenting. And then as I got more disciplined in my Reiki practice specifically, things shifted. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And then also like
Right.
working with plant medicines for a while and stuff in the North and South American indigenous traditions. There's certain diets you'll go on to do certain rituals and stuff like that. As I started doing those things as well, I saw openings and shifts in my awareness. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
things where all of a sudden I'm seeing things I wasn't seeing before and I'm hearing stuff I wasn't hearing, and animals are responding differently to me than they were before because of the way I'm eating.
Yes.
Wild
Wow.
animals are just landing next to me and crawling like different. It's just crazy stuff. You know what I'm saying in that way, but
Right.
I can say from my history through it, that it started out with curiosity and then it became practice, and then practice led to a shift in my reality, whereas that I just can't do certain things. So I understand that it is holistic. And a lot of the way I look at it is, I know people who are trans mediums and do those types of things where they're channeling spiritual energy and stuff as well as what I do. Um, when we're working with energy, it's the way I look at it is like you can't take a consumer car and drive the Indy 5000. It
Right.
can't handle that. Like it's not made for that, right? So
Right.
as I'm doing more energy work and I'm doing whatever, I gotta realize that this vessel has to be as strong and as clean as possible, because otherwise, negative and dark spirit, it attacks weakness. So
Yes.
if I'm doing spiritual work and I'm not as strong and as fortified as possible, then I'm likely going to get sick because I'm stepping into energies that look to destroy, and they're going to find the weak places in me to settle. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? So
Absolutely.
that's why I always talk about holistic, because to me it's like a boxer trains and they eat a certain way before they go into a match. You know what I mean? And they might the good ones I think stay that way. Some of them go back to eating whatever, but my warrior side is how I approach my healing work. Like in my mind, it's very much that it's that kind of thinking, you
Mm.
know?
Absolutely.
Um, if that
Absolutely.
answers the question.
No, it answers it beautifully. And one of the things that's been the most disheartening to me about African spirituality or the community
Mhm,
is our nonchalant attitude towards health.
mhm,
I walk in these spaces, it's 10 years, December 1st. I've been vegan, plant based. I say vegan most of the time just because when I
mhm.
say it, people know
People
what
know
that
it.
means as far as what I eat, right? Even though I'll still get that every now and again. Do you at least eat fish? And I'm like, nah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we have a nonchalant attitude about about diet. And when you look at other spiritual traditions, whether the yoga traditions, you look at Hinduism, Buddhism, you look at Taoism, all these other what we call earth-based or earth-centered spiritual traditions, the diet is like up top of the list. Like it's
Hmm.
widely known, it's widely practiced. Everybody may not be perfect with it, but it's something that's widely practiced.
Hmm.
Like I can't eat at most events, where I go to and it's African spiritual, hosted, but I can go to the Hindu temple and
Right.
eat, because I know they're focused on the diet.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And healers should, in my opinion, and this is no judgment, because I'm even talking to myself, healers should look healed.
Indeed. Ideally.
Spiritual, exactly.
Hmm.
Spirituality looks a certain way. Even, you go to Egypt, and I know there's some propaganda, even way back when, of what they depicted on the walls, right?
Hmm.
But if you look at how the people look that they painted on the walls, everybody looks healthy,
Indeed.
right? That is what they are demonstrating to the world, right? So there's a look to it. So, you know, I'm big on diet, should be a part of it. I mean, if we practice E5 and the wisdom of nature, the natural order of things, what we eat, amongst other things, falls in line with that. And if we're not
Hmm.
in tune with that, that's the reason why we're doing elbows every year. That's the
Yep.
reason why we're having all these obstacles and blockages every year, is because we're not adhering to the laws of nature, which governs, again, how we interact with one another, how we eat, how we
Hmm.
sleep. You know, we're not walking around in nature barefoot. We're
Hmm.
African spiritualists who don't want to go outside when the sun
Right.
is out in the summertime. We're not doing any sunbathing, anything, none
Yeah.
of these things that are a part of the natural order of things. So,
Hmm.
um, you and I have talked about, the plant-based thing. So I just
Hmm.
wanted, you to touch base on that. One other thing though that you mentioned And we're talking about again that imbalance of, the masculine and the feminine, in how men and women relate to one another, or the balance of the masculine and the feminine in ourselves.
Hmm.
How much of a role do you think it plays in relationships between, men and women, where a man can't open up emotionally if the woman we're dating is overly masculine? How much of a role do you think that plays in, men being able to open up and express themselves?
I mean, it does play a role, um, because the masculine, as we know it, isn't necessarily sensitive or forgiving. So the
Right.
masculine, you come to the masculine with a problem, the masculine says, "So what you gonna do about it?" The masculine
Mm-hmm.
doesn't say, "I'm sorry you feel that way. You need a
Right.
hug." You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? The masculine don't do that. The masculine is like either like, "What you gonna do about it?" or "What? That's not my problem. Figure it
Right.
out." Like, if I think of my parents, my mother gave me a hug, she rubbed my back, my pops would be like, "What you gonna do about it?" Figure it out. Well, why are you telling me? I had to figure it out for myself. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like,
Right.
if
Absolutely.
if
Absolutely.
if the woman that you're dealing with exhibits that type of energy, you're not going to get that, right?
Right.
But that to me goes back to like our holistic health in general. There's a sound healer. He's a European descended brother from North Carolina, actually, called Tom Kenyon, who I like. He does all these like channelings of different indigenous songs from like all over the world and different traditions and stuff. He's really interesting. But he said a teaching once that I always repeat, and he said, the problem is that people have a dog and want it to act like a cat. You know what I'm saying? So if you want something to act like a
Mm.
cat, you got to get a cat. But if you want a dog to act like a cat or a cat to act like a dog, you're just gonna be suffering all the time.
Right.
So to me,
Right.
I think that like we we try to embark on these a relationship. That union is sacred. You know what I mean? And it's much layered than most people admit in regards to what's happening when two people come together. You know what I mean? You start to
Right.
create a council, and ancestors on both sides start there's all this stuff that starts going on, right? Um, so I'm saying that to say that like I think we have minimized the power of what those agreements are. So we think just because we call somebody our girlfriend, now they're supposed to exhibit all these characteristics because we've given them that title or we've given them that
Right.
place in our life. And that's not what's going to happen, right? So really it goes back to us healing ourselves so that we know what healthy feels like, and then having the discernment to embark in a relationship with a person who's qualified to hold the space you need them to hold for you. You know what I mean? And
Right.
I think that that's a big part of the problem is we just talk about we talk about each other's inadequacies all the time and what they can't do for us and what we can't do. But it's like, yeah, a lot of us can't do that stuff because we never learned how.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of sisters weren't safe enough to not be masculine. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So you can't
Absolutely.
you can't expect, to me, like, it's funny. I used to spend like I grew up as a 5%er, you know what I'm saying? So I used to spend a lot
Mm-hmm.
of time with the brothers here, and I used to go to one of the Wu-Tang studios and be around Papa Wu because of who some of my older brothers are. So I remember this brother was complaining about this woman, and he was like, "This B, blah 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 blah, all this stuff," and Papa Wu stopped him, Freedom stopped him. He was like, "Liv, I'm gonna tell you something, and I'm gonna say this once. If a woman is showing you a bitch, she's just reflecting the bitch in you."
Mm-hmm.
Excuse my language, but I
No,
remember
you
as a
good.
young man, he said that I was a young man, and I sat there and I was like, "Oh snap!" Like that just rung for me. That like
Mm-hmm.
he basically was like, "You getting what you give."
Right.
Like if she don't feel safe, if she don't feel, and he went on to a whole conversation about it, but he was basically explaining is that like they giving you what you give them. You know what I'm saying? Like he went into this whole thing of the idea of like the womb, and he was like, the nature of feminine of the womb holders is that small things go in and bigger things come out in time. You know what I'm saying? So he was just
Right.
like, what you give them, they're going to give it back to you and it's going to be amplified. So if
Right.
you're not experiencing something that you like, it's because you're giving them something that they're giving back to you. It's coming back in your face. You know what I mean? Whether it's showing us ourselves or whether it's just revealing a truth about how we're being. I think that before we get into that conversation about women should be this way and men should be that way, we really need to again examine the damage and the havoc that colonization has done to us. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So that we can acknowledge that's there, and then as we're embarking in relationship, for me, like with my partner, we that's present. So we're always checking in with each other to make sure that like it's a term I always say. I want to make sure I'm not stepping on the flowers while I'm dancing. You know what I'm saying? Meaning that like,
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? I think I'm fun and I'm doing what I need to be doing and I just destroyed something beautiful. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I was
Right.
doing what felt right to me. You know what I'm saying? And so I check in with my partner all the time to make sure that when I answer a question for her that's sensitive, or when she's explaining something to me, I don't just assume that what I'm doing is what she needs, and
Mm.
that what I'm doing should be what she accepts from me, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Because it's like if I want her to be happy, then I need to be willing to do what she needs to be happy, or else I don't need to be with her. That's just the
Right.
bottom line.
Mm.
Absolutely.
You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? And so like I hope that answers the question, but that's a big way of
Yeah.
like how I've come to understand these things. And it's from my energy work, because working with energy, you're dealing with positive negative charge. That's just the reality. It is electric.
Mm.
So I have to embody both things in a way. I have to be fluid in a way to do what I do. I can't do healing work and approach things from the masculine. It's not going to work that way,
Mm. Right.
Right.
because then I won't be able to hold space for people. You know what I mean? I'll be approaching them in a solution-based way as opposed to holding space and allowing them to let go what they need to let go and feel safe to do so without judgment and without someone being like what you should be doing, or that was dumb, or you know what I'm saying? Like all those
Right.
types of things.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
Nobody's gonna heal like that, you know?
Right. I feel like
Um,
solutions come way down the line. You
yeah.
know, there's some things that you got to pull back. There's some things you got to work through. There's
Mm.
some things that you have to understand the why. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's some things then you just have to be able to have somebody listen as you just, pour out what you need to.
Mm.
Yeah.
Then
It
as you
needs to be
start to
trust
build
and
yourself
consent.
back up, right. And
Yeah.
once you start building yourself back up, then the solutions can then come in. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
when you interject a solution, um, is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The timing of
Absolutely.
all that and allowing.
Absolutely.
It's like
Absolutely.
we all got a lot of, we all got a lot of work to do. That's the
Exactly.
reality. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And
Right.
and I think that, because I said I grew up around like Ifa, Yoruba, Santeria community, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it's a great space, but the analogy I've been using recently with that, and now I'm starting to see it in like the plant medicines community and in things like Reiki. I've been thinking a lot about Star Wars, and when they brought Anakin Skywalker to Yoda, and Yoda said, "Yeah, he's powerful, but he has too much fear in him," and he
Yep.
ultimately turned to Darth Vader. So it's like a lot of us. You were talking about the eating and all that stuff. Many of us have picked up these traditions, but we haven't decolonized ourselves.
Mm.
Right. Right.
So my father used to always tell me when I would go to someone to get a reading, and they would tell me to do certain things. Um, Ultimately, my father used to always say, listen, the most powerful aspect of anything in this tradition is Iwa Pele. Like he was like, good character will
Yep.
solve everything. He was
Mm.
like, so if you don't have good character, you're gonna have to, a bunch of chickens are gonna have to do this and a bunch of, you know what I'm saying? Like he was like, but
Right.
you can have good character and you're not gonna have problems in your life. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? And like
Yeah.
that's like was my teaching with these things. You know what I'm saying? And him sitting next to me and being like, yeah, that person was here last time talking about the same thing, and they're still doing the same thing, and think that someone doing some offerings or whatever are going to change the condition when they haven't been real about themselves and
Right.
haven't taken the time to change and think about what am I doing in my life to create this condition. And I think that really to me people are just bringing the principles and the way that we were taught through Western Christianity to something else.
Mm,
So Ifa is
Right.
Jesus to them. That's what they're looking for Ifa to answer all their questions and be their savior, and therefore their Orishas to play roles similar to how they've been taught to believe in God and Jesus and Mary and stuff. Um, and that's not what it is.
right.
But they
Right.
they haven't removed that doctrine from themselves, so they approach it in that way.
Right.
And you know, and it's we got to do a lot of healing.
Right.
A
You
lot,
know,
a lot, a lot. And we got to focus on the substance because there's been a lot
yeah.
of substance that's been removed. We do, a lot of rituals. We do a lot of benbays and
Hmm.
Ifa festivals and things of that nature. But then what about the real work, right? As
Yeah.
our Luo says, when you get your hand of Ifa, there's a part on in that ceremony where he'll say, now, we killed this chicken, now you got to go and kill the chicken in you, right?
Hmm.
Now, his way of saying now the work is on you. You've
Right.
done
Yeah.
this ceremony, you got some information, you know strengths, weaknesses, some things that are causing you blockages. You've gone through this process to have protection. Now you got to go do the work because at the end of the day, when you go back to work, you're the only person in that office who went through this experience.
Hmm.
Those buttons that you have, those triggers that you have,
Hmm.
they didn't just disappear as a
Right.
result of the ceremony. So
Mm,
you still got to put in the work. And a lot of times the work isn't being done, So,
Yeah. And you said some. I don't want to cut you, but you said
no, you're
something. I'm
fine.
sorry. Um, and so a big part of that is because we're leaving these powerful things, and then we're going back to the office. You
Yeah.
understand what I mean?
Hmm.
It's not happening in a village where you're held accountable and everybody knows what you went through and everybody sees you and there's even people who are going to support where you're now your new journey, your new space,
mm,
and I think that that's a big part of it is that like we're still doing this in a void. So therefore, when we go out into the regular world, we're not called by the name that we now have because we've gone through an initiation.
Hmm.
We're still Jimmy or Shirley
Right.
or whatever, right? So
Right.
then your new self isn't even being acknowledged. So you're going to go back into your old habits, or you're
mm,
going to still live in your old way. And I think that's what I keep saying. We got a lot of work to do. Is because it takes a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of effort for us to decolonize because society doesn't uphold those things. You know,
Right.
um,
Right. And that's important what
yeah,
you said about we're not called these new names that we receive
right. Right.
because
I was
yeah,
just
people
gonna
don't.
pick up on that.
Man, people don't
Right.
understand your new name is a mantra. It's a
yeah,
prayer, right? You
Mm,
invoke that energy.
right.
My Ishe Fi name is Ifi Daryl. Ifi makes me cool. I didn't get
hmm,
that name because I am cool. It's a reminder to
you need to
myself,
cool down.
keep cool, right?
Right.
Right.
Ifi 4,
Yeah.
Ifi brings me Ray. It is telling me the way in which I'm going to receive my blessings, my abundance, all the goodness of life is through E5. So if I decide I want to get it from the next promotion, that's not going to happen that way. If I think I'm going to
Mhm.
get it from another random woman I might date, it's not going to happen that way. If I think, I need more money, let me play the lottery. If I hit the lottery, then that's what's going to bring me. No, that's not what it is. E5 is going to bring me my abundance. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that one. Go ahead,
Right.
O'Shea.
Mhm.
No, I was just gonna say the same thing. That goes back to the conversation that you and I have had personally about us not really having a community. How
Mm-hmm.
we come together and we do these, like you say, the Bembays, the EPOP festivals, and all of these different things. But we leave those spaces and go back to our regular lives, and we're back to, like you say, we're back Jimmy, Sam, we're back to all of these our regular selves again, all over
Mhm.
again.
Right.
You touched upon a lot of things that made me think about having to unlearn before we can start the learning process. Like we have to unlearn many of the things that society has taught us before we
Mhm.
can start to make space for the things that we need to learn. So yeah, definitely decolonizing our minds, decolonizing our spirits, getting back to focusing on nature. Like we really talk big about nature. I was just telling somebody earlier today that nature teaches us how to be here.
Hmm.
Right.
Nature teaches us who we need to be here. Nature was here before us. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. That community thing is huge.
Hmm.
Like the thing about it is that the way that we think, how many of us that are quote unquote a part of a community could say, hey, look, I need 10 families. We can go 30 miles outside the city. Man, we can buy this plot of land. We can all have a nice house built on that land. You know, we can grow crops, we can do this, that, and the other. We have plenty of space to do our work. You know, you're not gonna be able to get, despite how big, and you keep hearing all this information about how it's like the fourth largest or fastest growing Ifa is a spiritual tradition.
Hmm.
You can't find 10 families who will be like, yeah, let's go. It's gonna always be
Hmm.
somebody, I prefer to be on this side of town. It's gonna be on
Hmm.
somebody, oh no, I really, have my mind made up on doing this. Where's the sacrifices where we come together? Because at the end of the day, it's not like we're not talking about going to the projects.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, some people may prefer to be in the city, or I want to be on this part of the city or that part of the city. But think of what we can do, how we can come together, and we can change not only our conditions, but we can change our kids' lives, so forth and so on,
Hmm.
by just saying we're going to come together and we're going to build a community. Hell, if you can get 100 families to go somewhere and buy some land up, now you put yourself in a situation where you can hire all the police, or you can influence who are actually the police, the kind of grocery stores. As you keep building, you can influence the kind of hospitals, you know, the school systems, what the teachers look like, what the teachers teach essentially. But, there has to be some sacrifice. There's going to
Hmm.
always be those people who are going to say, nah, I would rather do this. I would rather do that. Man, we could do a lot of things. As a community, we make too much money.
Hmm.
As a community, we make too much money not to be doing bigger things. I mean, as long as African spiritual traditions have been in this country, like look at the Nation of Islam
Hmm.
and how short the time Nation of Islam was a thing before they started making like big noise,
Yeah.
big noise, building schools, the whole nine. Now you got
Hmm.
restaurants and all kind of different things created by the Nation of Islam, and the Nation of Islam hasn't been around that long.
Mm-mm.
I mean, black churches have been around for forever, but considering how long black churches have been around, all we really succeeded in doing is having bigger black churches.
Well, it's by design because we did have that at one point in time. It's just that it was a threat, and then with segregation and stuff, they found a way to kind of like funnel our money out of our community. You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
we did have that, you know. They
Absolutely.
just these people just kind of they don't want anybody else to have anything, you know. This is like you said, like it's funny. I was in Washington State, excuse me, and the reservation up there was just flourished. It's flourishing in a way that was amazing to me, you know. And excuse me, it showed an example of what's possible if people can healthily align in their values and not be so drawn into what the standard American social values are, you know what I mean, and stick to their own
Right.
and not be trying to be a part of something else. I think that our people have been tricked into wanting to sit at the table of the person who oppresses them, you know what I'm saying,
Right.
instead of making their own table.
Mm.
So that goes back into earlier what we were saying about like the decolonization and the healing we have to do
Mm-hmm.
first. We're not going to be able to create a community if we don't value community and don't see the purpose in it and don't feel safe. because we
Mm.
don't
Right.
trust each other.
Right.
You know, I think if we trusted each other, then we'd be ready to do those things.
Mm.
You know, but we don't feel safe around it. A lot of us don't feel safe around each other. You know what I mean? Um,
Absolutely.
and that's the problem. It goes back to how we feel about ourselves and the value we have for our own lives. And if we don't have that for self, then we're not going to treat each other in a certain kind of way. And we already see what that looks like,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely.
But I do think like again, that's my issue with how a lot of people are with these traditions and people are being initiated and brought into traditions. A lot of what I'm starting to realize is there needs to be, at least to me, and the way I'm going to start teaching moving forward, is having more steps. So before I'm teaching people certain things, we might need to be doing meditation for a while. You
Mm.
know what I'm saying? And
Mm.
do other
Right.
things.
Right.
And then we get to that point where you learn something else, you know, before people do, plant medicine ceremonies and all these other stuff. Like before they get to that medicine, then it's like maybe you come and we do a silent weekend where we just sit around a fire and we do stuff without talking and you go sit with a tree and you go do this thing and do these other stuff that's more that's harder to do. It's the
Mm.
real work. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And those are the people who then qualify themselves to get more
Right.
because they've shown that they have the wherewithal. It's like the martial art that I learned in is a family art for the Philippines. It comes from an indigenous um culture, the indigenous aspects of the cultures, and it's not like a westernized approach to a lot of it. It has a mysticism aspect. It has dealing with the elements and different things. But like after I got my black belt, after we got our black belts, me and three of my brothers together, our grandmaster, who's this Filipino woman, she completely changed how she treated us. And then she started re-showing us techniques we learned before, the hidden, like secret things in it that she didn't show us. She's like, I needed to know if I could trust you to teach you these things.
Mm.
Wow.
So we
Right.
had 10 years of training, and then all of a sudden, things we had learned years ago, she retaught it to us differently.
Mm.
Wow.
Right. She had to trust you.
And they were
Yeah.
probably mind blowing things like, oh yeah, that.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, but
Right.
it's like
Right.
that's the that's what we don't do.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And it's not that some like these days I hear people talk about spiritual gatekeeping and stuff, and it's like kind of like, oh, it's coming from patriarchal thinking, it's hierarchical and all that stuff. But the reality is that we kind of have to do that to some degree. It's not about withholding, but I think it's about upholding the sacredness of things,
Right.
Right.
because we don't cherish the sacred anymore in that way. It's like
Absolutely.
you gonna move different when you know your grandma's watching you all the time,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
right? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like it's
Mm.
just
Right.
different. When you know that, you move differently in the world.
Right.
When
Absolutely.
when when your ancestors tell you, we see what you're doing and we need you to do da 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 da, you're like, oh man, you know what I'm saying? You just live
Yep.
different.
Right.
But people who don't have that awareness, then they just present one way and do something else. So before people get certain, I've been realizing like before people learn certain things, I have to make sure that their integrity is intact and that they really uphold the sacredness of things. You
Mm.
know what I mean? Because then they're going to make a mess, and then I can't really hold them accountable because they don't know any better.
Right.
But it's
Right.
it's yeah, it's a lot.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you just want to give it to everybody. You want
Right.
everybody to know things and have it, right? It's a
Absolutely.
it's a yeah, it's an interesting I think it's going to take these conversations, and a lot of us I think there's new agreements that need to be made, and figuring
Mm.
out like how to reapproach things. You know
Right.
what I mean? And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
you know,
And Oshayun and myself, we are dedicated to trying to continue this conversation. So, we greatly appreciate you stopping by and having a
Very much so.
conversation with you.
yeah, indeed, I
Um,
appreciate it as well.
one other question though I have for you, men at work healing. So
Hmm.
how can people kind of tap in with you? How can people get involved? How can people reach out to you if they need help healing?
hmm So our website is menatworkhealing.com. On Instagram, it's at Men at Work Healing. Um, those are two ways that people can reach us. On our website, there are ways to ask questions and to register to get information and things of that nature. Currently, we are in New York City. Um, we have talks about going to other places, and we're willing to do that, but it does take resources and it does take organization.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Um, we're in the works of creating some and during the pandemic we were doing some online things, but a lot of our stuff has been happening in person. So we are going to be creating some possibilities online for the brothers who aren't here in New York. Um, but for brothers like in the New York area, we do hold at least one gathering a month. Um, and we are looking to expand and to go other places. You know what I mean? That's the goal. Our goal is to have like chapters all over the place.
Right.
You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? And have brothers meeting all over the place doing this
Yes,
work.
sir.
Um, we want to get it so that we're not, it's not a type of thing where it's like we're trying to center ourselves. We're looking to create something that's going to create momentum that will not need us anymore at some point in time. You
Mhm.
know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's the idea.
Right.
But yeah, on Instagram, they can contact us. Through our website, they can contact us. As you know, I'm super active on Instagram a lot. So
Hmm.
at Daoud Sun, like my first name, DaoudSun. Um, People can DM me and ask me questions and stuff. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
I do offer that to a degree. If it gets to a certain time, I might be like, you might want to sign up for a council session or something. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna just
Right.
I can't be there for everybody all the time. There needs to be
Right.
some
Absolutely.
reciprocity, just so that I can replenish myself so that I can serve. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Absolutely.
But yeah, we're accessible. There's five of us, and there's different brothers who do different things with all within three of us do healing work majority of our life. So, there's three brothers who offer counsel in different ways. One of them is more clinical, in the clinical training of social work and approaching psychology and stuff.
Hmm.
So, with him, he has an organization called Asiatics Getting Well, where he does counsel and he teaches meditation and stuff. Our brother Sadiq, our brother Deshaun is an initiated priest in Ifa, and he also does other kinds of readings and different things. So he offers various services as well. So yeah, if they tap in with us, and explore the possibility, you know.
Mhm.
I say. So for all our prayer warriors out there, we need those prayers, you know, help these brothers, get that chapter all over the
Ashe.
place.
Ashe.
And go to the site, support, financially, you know, however you can. So, but again,
Hey,
thank you for coming on our show.
Yeah, we appreciate
Um,
it.
and to all the family
yeah,
out there, thank you for tuning in. Please hit the like button. It's somewhere down here. Like, share, subscribe. We appreciate you guys for always rocking with us and hanging out with us. Hope you enjoyed this. I know you will enjoy this.
Right.
Watch it again, rewind it. But you know, till next time, take care of yourselves. Life is for the living. So have your experience, live life out loud and on purpose. Till next time, peace.
Peace.
peace.